Justice Ajiji Alex have finally sealed the fate of the culprits who were involved in the case or the murder of the late Suzan Magara. This was one of the most chilling ransom cases to ever surface in Uganda. And before I tell you what they have been handed, let me jog your memory a bit. Now, Suzan Magara was a young accountant who was kidnapped on the 7th of February back in 2018 in Lunguja. Eventually, her kidnappers went on to ask her family for $1 million, almost 3.6 billion Uganda shillings. The family went on to negotiate with the kidnappers because honestly, that is money too absurd for anyone. And they went on to agree to pay 200,000 Uganda shillings. However, on the 19th of February, the kidnappers, to show how serious they were, they sent a package to the family and it had 2 fingers belonging to Suzan Magara. This is what made the case so crazy, guys. They also sent video evidence, obviously, of her asking the family to really pay these guys so she can what? Get her freedom back. Anyways, fast forward, the family managed to pay the money on the 23rd of February and it was delivered and, you know, blah, 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 blah. 4 days later, the body of Suzan Magara was found in an area known as Kitiko Birongo along Entebbe Express. Then the case begins because it was so crazy. Anyways, so it has been a long battle of 8 years and 9 people were arrested. And through all the court proceedings, this is what the court has concluded on. 2 of the culprits, a gentleman known as Abbas Musa, he's not even a gentleman. Those people are, I don't know, demons. Abbas Musa and a lady known as Hajara Nakandi have been sentenced to death. This is because Abbas was the gentleman who cut off Suzan Magara's fingers. He also went on to inject her with overdose of ketamine. I think it's a drug, you know. And also he went on to suffocate her to death after they had found out that she had been with them for 3 weeks and they thought that she could identify them to the investigators eventually. Hajara Nakandi, the only lady part of the team, has also been sentenced to death because she was the one guarding Suzan Magara for all the 3 weeks that she was there. And the court just found that it was really so inhuman for a lady to watch another lady go through the same pain. The other 7 people have been sentenced to life in prison. However, they broke down the role that each of them did. So it was said that earlier that year, a gentleman known as Ismail Bukenya, one of the other 7, he was an imam at the makeshift mosque in Kampala, in Usafi. He organized the meeting, planned for these guys, and he was also in charge of the ransom proceedings. Chewolwa, who is another person in Abubeka, part of the other 7, he collected the ransom from Suzan Magara's family. Lubega drove the vehicles. He's called Lubega Yusuf. He drove the vehicles throughout the kidnappings of Suzan Magara. A gentleman known as Kato and his brother known as Waswa and another one known as Sali Muzamiru. These guys kept watch of the premises where Suzan Magara was being kept. The Justice Ajiji gave some of these reasons as to why he gave them such a very intense punishment. Number 1, he talked about the brutality of the case. Suzan Magara was taken through a lot, both mental and psychological torture, to the point where she had to accept that she was probably not making it back home to her family. Secondly, they actually extorted the family financially, asking for $1 million down to 200,000 US. And even after they paid that money, about 700,000 million Uganda shillings, Suzan Magara was still killed. That is just no value for human life whatsoever. Thirdly, the judge also talked about how brutal this case was to the public and shocking, and it made people feel unsafe in their own country. Like, if your family members could be kidnapped and they ask you for money that you don't have, honestly, that is really so crazy for our community. And so he justified these sentences and also went on to ask the Department of Prosecutions, the investigators, to confiscate everything that these guys bought using the ransom money, which included 3 acres of land in Buikwe, which cost 140 million Uganda shillings, plus land in Luwero, several motorbikes, plus so many other vehicles which were used in the abduction of Suzan Magara. Finally, justice is served. Finally, one of the most interesting things I found about this case is the fact that the gentleman or the judge who just passed the sentence to these guys, it was actually his last case, because he has reached the retirement age. But if you've been following this case closely, you can see how long it can take for someone to find justice in Uganda. And I don't know if there's any justice for someone who lost their lives, but I pray for the family of Suzan Magara. I hope it brings some kind of closure, and may her soul continue resting in peace.